we get going?
Yep. Just to remind everybody, please speak into the microphones this evening. We are being recorded, and we're trying to get these to be live streaming videos on our website. And so the more we speak into our microphones, the more people want to listen to those streaming live videos where they can actually listen to what's being said. So please try to remember, and I may kindly remind anybody who starts speaking off microphone to go back in and try to speak on microphone.
Yours sounds good. Okay, so we can get started?
Mm-hmm.
Do we say our names? Yeah. I'm John McLaughlin.
Vicki Yates.
Okay. First item on the agenda is the update on the Public Works Master Plan. Christopher Spurgeon, did I say it right?
Yeah.
Spurgeon, yeah. Come on down. Whoever
And-
wants to come and...
Yeah, and I think just before that, Tony Conkle is going to kind of explain a little bit. He's the planner on city staff for the Public Works Master Plan.
Oh.
And I think he's going to just give the Historic Review Board and anybody in the audience a little background on how master plan works through the planning process and how what role the Historic Review Board will have in this portion of it and in the future phases.
Got it.
Hey, thanks. Good evening. So what has happened is Public Works is looking to consolidate their offices and operations out of the building on Center Street, the property that the city owns down in that area. What the Oregon City Municipal Code allows for is what we call a concept master plan. And what this does is it allows for a large property, institutional or commercial in some cases, that want to plan out for 5, 10, 15, up to 20 years and get the major infrastructure and square footages, concepts, all approved so that they have some certainty as they move forward throughout the years that they can still implement their plan. And why this is necessary is when you come in for an application to develop a building, that approval is only good for 2 years. So this gives you the ability to look out much further. And in larger developments, it allows you to address large infrastructure deficiencies or capacity that may be needed for such things as transportation, sanitary, water. Looks at those larger picture items. And then the applicant can include as much detail concerning building types, sizes, square footages, uses in that plan as well. And that's what we have here. So the applicant, being the Oregon State Public Works Department, has submitted a master plan to the city to review. The master plan is conceptual. So what happens is once you have an approved master plan, you can come in then with your buildings. And those would go through the land use process again when those applications are submitted. So this isn't an approval of a building type or a certain design or even the location or the exact square footage. It's just the rough ballpark estimates of what we expect on the site. And so what we're looking for tonight was to update the Historic Review Board. Obviously, the property's in the McLaughlin Neighborhood Conservation District. And to bring the Historic Review Board up to speed on what's being proposed and what we kind of would expect as we move through this process and some of these later buildings and site work come online in subsequent years. Really what the applicant is going to be presenting tonight, we've identified really 3 issues that are probably of concern to HRB. There may be more as we go through tonight and you have questions. The property is zoned, the majority of the property is zoned institutional, which allows for these government facilities to be constructed there. There is a criteria that says the building height is limited to 35 feet if you're within 100 foot of the property line, of the boundary into the institutional zone. So as part of the application, we are requesting an adjustment to exceed that 35 foot along Center Street for some of those buildings to try and address the bluff, and to be able to get up to the top where a majority of the workshops and storage vehicles are going to be, and be able to tie that in to the office buildings that are going to be located along Center Street. Another adjustment is going to concern the buildings up there. Some of them, are proposed to be demolished, moved, removed, and so bring that forward to you as well. And then the third exemption is to talk about The buildings up on top of the bluff are really industrial in nature. You know, they're going to be for storage of vehicles, to be able to get them out of the weather, storage of materials that the city needs for the work they do on our streets or when we're dealing with winter storms and whatnot. And so those buildings were requesting an exemption from needing to bring those in to the HRB for approval for every one of those buildings on top. The buildings along Center Street and the parking lots, those would all still need to come through the Historic Review Board for approval. But because of the nature of the use being more industrial up on top and the utilitarian nature of their use and their design, that's why we are requesting that adjustment for the buildings on top. We would hope to, we hope that one of the results of this is to be able to get a letter of support from the Historic Review Board, hopefully agreeing with the adjustments that are being requested and in support of the concept master plan. If there are concerns, we certainly want to hear them and try to address them as we can. We do have a planning commission hearing scheduled for this on April 27th. So talked with Christina about working with the board through another work session to kind of formulate that letter if that is something you so choose to do and something that you feel you can do. And even if there are certain concerns you have, we'd certainly like to see those in that letter as well as areas that you can support. So that's kind of just the land use side of how we're running this process. And when subsequent buildings come in that do need to go in front of the Historic Review Board, what happens is if the buildings being proposed are in compliance with the approved master plan, and the master plan goes in front of our planning commission for approval, those subsequent buildings would come in and they'd be considered a type 2 approval, which is done by staff, an administrative decision. It still goes out for public comment, but we only receive written testimony. We don't have a public hearing for it. For the buildings along Center and the parking lots, we would run concurrently with that type 2 application, an application to the Historic Review Board to comment on it, and then we would roll that decision into our site plan design review approval review for the buildings where it would be applicable. So that's kind of how we see this process moving forward throughout the total planning timeline for this concept plan. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our consultants here to answer any or give their presentation. And if you have any questions of me or afterwards, feel free to ask.
Is this kind of a reiteration from a couple months ago?
Yeah,
Or
I think it's two things. They're going to, for Ms. Yates, who was not here in January, give a little brief overview, and then to give an update of where the consultants are from the last time we
from
met.
last time?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm David Hyman. I apologize for my voice. I've got a cold and I'm losing my voice, but I'll do the best I can. I'm a principal with DECA Architects. This is Chris Spurgeon, who's listed on the application. He's also with DECA. And John Lewis, the operations manager with the Public Works Department. And Dave Pinyard with Historic Preservation Northwest. He's our historic consultant on the project. So as Tony said, I'd like to give you just a quick overview of the project. This is kind of a scaled-down version of what we've given at previous meetings, but we've presented now to the City Commission, once to the Historic Review Board, and then we've had a meeting with the Neighborhood Association, and we have some additional meetings planned coming up. This is the general site, looking at an aerial for the site, and you can kind of see, actually, is there a pointer? The upper site with a green, you can see the green building there. There's an upper site that has the armory and some of the smaller warehouse buildings that are on the upper side. And then the lower side is where the offices, the current offices for the Public Works Department are. So having studied a number of different sites for relocating this, we did a study in 2005 for a facilities plan for relocating or finding a place that was more suitable for the Public Works, for the Operations Department. We really came back to the conclusion, although we might have been able to, we did find sites that were bigger and flatter and so forth, that this, from a standpoint of sustainability, from a standpoint of responsible use of public money, to try to find creative ways to stay on the site that we're on and in some cases expand in order to make it more useful. So let me see if I can get this figured out here.
Okay, the button on the bottom, that'll be the pointer.
On the bottom. Let's see. Ah, fantastic. Okay, so here's this is the line of the bluff right here, and this is all lower site right now. And so there's kind of a mixture of uses down there. There's the office portion, then there's a fleet shop and some storage, and then on the upper site there's some buildings, older buildings that are being utilized in kind of as best they can be for storage of things for the operations department. So we've developed a whole new master plan for how to redevelop this site, and the biggest challenge, as Tony alluded to, is how to bridge those the 40-foot, 50-foot difference in height between the lower site and the upper site, so that it's a connected operation, so that it works together and people can communicate and they can have meetings quickly and not have to get in a car, drive around, go down to the lower site. So that's kind of the overview of the challenge that we were facing. And so these are the buildings that I was referring to. This is down on the lower site. This is the current offices of the operations department. This is also on the lower side. You can see the rock bluff, which is about 40 feet. It varies between 40 and 50 feet, depending on which end of the site you're looking at. And then this is also on the lower site with some storage and covered parking. And this is a building that we advised in 2005 to purchase, and the city did. This was kind of an open warehouse building. And so that's allowed us to expand some of the site area of the operations department. Next. And then now we're looking at the upper site. So these are the buildings, the old cannery warehouse, it's called. There's another small warehouse. There's a larger warehouse, which I think was that one we were looking down on, a green roofed one. And then this is the armory, which is currently not under our control, or actually not under the city's control. It's the Oregon Military Department has control over it, owns it essentially, but there's John and Nancy are trying to negotiate the acquisition of that, and I think that's in the works right now. So you can see that it's kind of a mishmash of buildings in various states of disrepair, and they're making do with it as best they can, but it's certainly not ideal. The armory, however, is in good shape and very well suited. It's a poured-in-place concrete building, and so by acquiring that, it'll have served great benefit, I think, to the whole operation. So here you can kind of see the layout of the property lines. This dark green area here is the armory site. This is the armory building, and this is the light green is kind of the current extent of the operations department, and so we've advised acquiring potentially some houses over here. The city did acquire a house that was here and tore it down. We're looking at vacating a portion of First Street and Washington Street because of the terrain. It will never be connected. There's a huge cliff right here, so it really doesn't serve the purpose of a street. And then there's two small lots. These are parking lots down on the lower site that are currently being used for parking, and we're maintaining those. So here, these are the adjustments, and this is the full phase master plan. And I'll show you after this. I'll show you the individual phasing of it. There's the 4 phases, but I wanted to put this up here to show you what adjustments that we're asking for as part of the master plan that Tony described, and maybe only 2 or 3 of these will have bearing on the Historic Review Board, but there are some setback issues. Allow 0 setback at the property line between Waterboard Park and the Oregon City Public Works Department, so that's right here. We're wanting to use as much of that site as possible, and we don't think it will have any impact on the proximity to the park, so we're asking for an adjustment to be made there. Allow 0 setback at the property line between the armory and OCPW, and that's right here. There's a setback requirement there, but since our plans are in the works to acquire the armory, it doesn't make sense to do a setback and then have to fill that in later, so we're asking for that. Allow 0 setback at the property line at proposed First Street and Washington Street vacation. That was that area up in here that I described. Allow a reduction in aisle width for surface parking lots on South Center Street. So those are these two lots here that are currently being used, there's a lot of, they're small lots, and, by the time you put in the landscape buffer and the setbacks and all of that, they're basically unusable. So we're asking to allow us to continue to use them as they are being used now, essentially. In the long-range plan, we may, I think in the ideal world, we'd actually get rid of those and have all of everything on this side of Center Street so that you wouldn't be crossing the street. And I think, maybe there'll be a property trade in the future or something like that for some property up here. That would be, I think, in an ideal world, that would be the best scenario. Allow a reduction, let's see, that was exempt use of City Code 17.62.055, institutional and commercial building standards for all construction on the upper site. And that's essentially to be judged on the upper side, since they are industrial buildings, as industrial buildings, and not have to meet the kind of commercial standards of windows and pedestrian standards that you would normally have to meet. We will comply with those along Center Street, but we're asking to be exempt from those on the upper site. And then finally, allow an increase in height on the lower site for this 4-story office building. The basic concept behind this building was to bridge the two sites without having to build a separate elevator, so that you would have the offices of the Public Works Department, the Engineering Department, which is moving over from its current location. Eventually, when that building is built, they will join the Operations Department and all be in one building. And then that building will have to have an elevator anyway. So if we make it 4 stories, it's kind of the highest and best use of the land, we think, and at the same time, it bridges that height differential between the two sites. Next. So these are just quickly, I'll just run through the phasing. This would be the first phase where we would build the dewatering facility and some covered bin storage and some covered truck parking, and regrade the site. Thanks, that helps. So the grading of the site is pretty key to this, too, because it's a very undulating site with a lot of grade change, and it really would hamper the usability of it. So we're planning on making it a demonstration project for stormwater detention, routing stormwater in a way that it's visible. We're going to bring it down into a cistern at the bottom of the hill, so you'll see it coming down from the cliff. We want it to, as we regrade, we'll channel that water and make it a focus. And then there's some bin storage over here. So this is the first phase, basically regrading. At this point, we're assuming we don't have the armory in this phase, although that might move up in the order if we do acquire that. And then the next phase would be building this office building, and it has a bridge connecting the upper site. Some additional surface parking, because we will need a certain amount of parking to serve that office building, at which point we will not have torn down these buildings here. So in the final phase, this will become parking, and we'll serve this, and we'll get rid of this parking. But in the interim, we'd like some surface parking up here to meet the code-required parking for that building. Next. And then a fleet shop and a welding shop and some storage. So this would be one building here, basically, and you can see this kind of covered walkway that connects to the office building. And at that point, we're proposing to demolish the existing office building and turn that into parking. And we'll show you, I know have been some comments at the neighborhood meeting and so forth about maintaining the kind of pedestrian continuity of that street, and so that it's not just an open parking lot. And we've done some quick studies and sketches and have some ideas about how to do that, so that to mitigate that issue. And then finally, taking down that Cameron warehouse, which was that kind of light gray building that I showed you that the city had acquired since 2005. Adding, at this point, acquiring the armory, and adding some additional covered truck parking. This would be a stormwater detention facility that will be landscaped and with drought-resistant plants, and part of that kind of demonstration project for stormwater management. And here you can see the cistern that I was talking about right here. So this water will be coming probably underground at this point, but daylighting and then coming down here. And that We may collect that water, use it for flush trucks, put it to actual useful purpose. And then there's also a stormwater swale over here. So it really is kind of upgrading, enhancing the site, I think, is our goal. This was what we showed at the Historic Review Board meeting the last time we were here, saying, okay, this is just to show you the concept of a section cut through a building and a bridge across there. Since then, we've started and I want to emphasize, we've started the process of just doing some quick sketches about this, and it's by no means the final design, but we just wanted to show you the kind of the direction we're thinking for this building to address some of the concerns that we heard at the neighborhood meeting about scale, and at I think possibly the Historic Review Board meeting too. I think we're all concerned about scale. It's a residential neighborhood. There are some mainly low-rise buildings there. The bluff is a big scale. I mean, the bluff is, as I said, 40 to 50 feet high, so it's not entirely out of scale with the landscape. But we also want to make sure that the building steps back in a way that is compatible with the existing neighborhood. So let's look at the next slide. So here's a quick sketch, and as I said, very quick, kind of sketchy idea about how this is the rock bluff here, and maybe we introduce some rock, some kind of stone material. It's almost like the building is kind of growing out of the bluff. It steps back and there are terraces at various locations along the building. There's possibly a covered walkway under the buildings. It's more hospitable to pedestrians. And you can kind of see, this is the bluff beyond it too, that it just kind of nestles in. The idea is that it sort of nestle into the bluff and become sort of a part of that. And then along the parking area, possibly recalling the colonnade or the columns that you can see on the existing office building by using a colonnade, some planters, maybe some seating to shield the parking. So it's a kind of preserving the continuity of that street frontage. Next. And here's an idea that this kind of came out of. This was an example of that, of how that might. It's a parking lot down in the Lloyd District in Portland, how they've addressed that with a trellis. So that's basically it. Dave Pinyard's here to talk about the existing buildings that we're proposing demolishing, and he's done a study of those buildings and has updated that study since the last Historic Review Board meeting.
We've done a little bit more. That's perfect. I've done a little bit more digging to try to find the history on these buildings, and it's gotten more intriguing as time has gone by. These three innocuous buildings, the two on the left and the one at the top, seem to be the these of Clackamas Community College. So a fairly humble beginnings for the college. These three buildings we only have one source on this information, so I'll say supposedly built between 1929 and 1932 as part of a National Youth Administration project, a New Deal project to train CCC workers. It's a little suspicious, though, that program would have started after the construction of these buildings, so I'm not sure which came first, but we have Depression-era buildings. The Oregon City Vocational School took over these buildings, and it's not clear exactly how they acquired them, but started using them as their auto repair, fender repair, what other things do they teach? Auto mechanics and machinists classrooms. So the three buildings, the large warehouse on the right, I think I said that incorrectly. Large warehouse on the right, the small warehouse on the top, and the cannery building were all being used for these three courses of study. Then in all through the war, they were being used for high school students for training them in vocational activities. And then after World War II, it became almost entirely a veterans program. So 1945 to 1950 was entirely filled with veterans in learning auto mechanics and repair. And by about the early 1950s, high school students started joining them, and then it became more of a high school level program. 1966, the vocational school was absorbed into Clackamas Community College, and then the classes moved to the brand-new Gladstone High School. They continued to do the occupational courses here until 1968, and then finally the new campus was built up further up on the hill, and everything moved there, and these were reverted. I'm not quite sure how the ownership works over to the city. So they have a little bit more history. We even found a quote that's in print, I guess you would say, that these three buildings might have housed the oldest vocational educational program in the state, having been built during the 1930s. That we might have some of the earliest buildings of a community college in Oregon. That's the history side. The idea of historic preservation is saving history and saving buildings usually of some description, some sort of style, some sort of architecture. Right now the history is there, but we don't necessarily have the buildings. They've been allowed to degrade over the years, and modifications have been made to them, so their integrity has dropped a little bit along with their condition. So it is, as a historic review board, I put that more into your lap. As a historic preservation consultant, I see these buildings as not eligible for the National Register due to their lack of distinction. They have some interesting history behind them, but their history is not evocative of the architecture that's there. We have not generated any interest yet in Clackamas Community College in these buildings. If they are interested in preserving their history through photographs or recordation or something like that, I think the need has been proven by DECA to remove these buildings, and one step below removal is salvage, and I think of that as almost a preservation method in this case, that their remains can be salvaged throughout the community. The siding type, the drop siding that they have is found throughout the historic district and could be reused by many individuals. So I think that is my recommendation, that they lack the distinction to be eligible for the National Register, and that they can be removed definitely without historic bodies being angered.
Got a pretty vernacular.
The lower site too, we have some integrity issues with windows and things like that. So we didn't feel the old headquarters, the operations facility, was eligible. That's a 1930s structure. Also, we have the site being used all the way back to 1910 by the Oregon City Water Works. They obtained the property from one of the pioneers, which I'm not quite got his name here. From Harry and Edith Jones. Sold off blocks 84, 85, 86, 89, 90, 91, 92 of the original town plat to the city's Board of Water Commissioners in 1910. So there's been a long use of the site by City Public Works.
Wow.
So a little history has been uncovered.
Thank you. Yeah. All right.
So we're interested in hearing your opinions, and as Tony said, it would be great if we could get a letter of support in some fashion for the proposals for the master plan and the adjustments. But if this is a long process, we're just in the middle of it. If there's recommendations that you have that we could, we'd love to hear them.
Good. I had a question on the building again, the 4-story building. Mm-hmm. The drawing you've got, yeah, that's kind of cool. Has that sketch? I mean, have you changed that a little bit since we talked a couple months ago? Tried to pull it back, or trying still? I mean, it looks great. It looks pretty cool. Kind of funky modern. It looks like you've scaled back a little bit, at least to soften the front. Yeah,
and what I've tried to do is scale the facade. I mean, it's still the building is the same size as it was before, but by, using materials in a way that, creating thinner vertical bands of materials and breaking up the massing, it sort of breaks down that massive scale that I think was evident in the section.
Well, I can certainly appreciate the practicality of what you're doing here, using the site.
Ken, can you begin?
Hello.
Practicality is there. I want to hear from the neighborhood association, people who actually live around it, how they feel about it. I appreciate the sensitivity to the natural slope and the slope and the landscaping efforts. But I'm not ready to jump up and support it till I know how the neighborhood feels about it.
Well, we met with the neighborhood once, and I don't know if Denise wants to speak, but she's here. I noticed her snuck up, so I saw her sneak in. I have actually meeting notes from the neighborhood meeting, if you'd like me to read some of their concerns and some of the issues that they brought up.
We have not seen this.
No, this is new.
We've not seen probably half of the stuff, the new stuff that you have in there.
Okay. I think, like, the phasing plans? You didn't see the phasing plans?
We've seen that, but you've added more,
Yeah. Well,
Well,
you've added more stuff to it.
This is new. Yeah, this is new. There isn't much other than this
See.
that's new.
I had a. Okay. Tony. Right now, proposed height or the code right now is 35 feet,
Correct.
and they're looking for 60 feet. It's a 60-foot, 4-story building. So you're asking for, nearly doubling the height, and is zero setback on the frontage.
Yes.
Yeah.
60 lets us get up high enough.
Right,
to-
because of the bluff and all that stuff, yeah. The site dictates it. And the code is 35 feet within 100 feet of frontage, but yet this is far closer than 100 feet.
Correct.
So much closer and taller because of the site.
Correct.
And you're looking for a letter from us basically giving you a green light to keep going. Vicki, you have questions?
Yeah. I have several questions, and I apologize because I'm the new kid on the block, and I haven't seen any of this before. First, you mentioned, Mr. Hyman, you mentioned the small parking lots across the street. You want to request reduction of aisle width. Does that mean you want to do that without landscape buffers?
No, I think that's in order to maintain the landscape buffers.
Okay.
Because if we can give up one or the other, either aisle width or landscape buffers, and we thought it was preferable to keep the landscape buffers.
And so by aisle widths, do you mean the width between where the cars park?
Yes.
From 24 feet, you want to reduce it to?
Yeah,
What do you want to
basically
reduce
what
it
it is
to?
now, essentially, is so it's functioning. It's just
I
that
see.
it doesn't meet city code, doesn't meet city standard.
You talk about zero setback because the Armory building will probably be acquired. What happens if that's not acquired? Are you asking conditional upon the?
Well, you want to go back to that slide? I mean, John might be able to address the point that they're at in their negotiations, and I think it's pretty far along. But even the Armory is just very underutilized. It's stored. The Oregon Military Department keeps it because they're very willing to give it up as long as they can find somebody gives them another place and trade for it. I think right now it's being used partly by the city to store a trolley car, and they have a tank in there. I think the military department. Okay, why don't you address that?
So the Oregon Military Department uses it for storage. There's a secondary school in there for GEDs, I believe they get in there now. There's a guy that's been doing that for years. But we've been using it for years as well to store our trolleys. In fact, we just renewed our lease for another year for 3 trolleys that'll be stored in the front end of that building. So there is some military presence there, and that's part of the agreement with the military department. When we sold them this property for like $10, they agreed to build that building, and if they ever stop using that building for military purposes for a period of 5 years, I think, that then it could revert back to the city ownership. So they continue to maintain kind of a recruitment office there. It's not your traditional recruitment office, but I think there's somebody in there that does that kind of business, and that's their office headquarters. Currently, what we're talking to the military department is they would like to. They're not interested in maintaining this long term, and at this location, they're interested in expanding their operation at Camp Withicum, which is where they want to put all their eggs. And we've talked to them specifically about selling this property. Right now, they're going through the process of getting it appraised, so that we can kind of look at values and figure out maybe how we might be able to work a deal with some property out at Camp Withicum. And I don't quite understand all their politics, but it's got something to do with they're worried about making a sale of a property and then losing that funding to some other military branch that maybe doesn't have the interest that the people that have control of this building do with Camp Withicum. So whether we can do a sale or not is yet to be seen. Their first indications, or their indications at this particular point in time, are they don't want to just sell it outright and then have that money kind of sitting in a pot to purchase some other property at Camp Withicum. The zero setbacks, as I understand it, right now only the Armory building is there. So that covered parking structure that's proposed, so it's not there. It's a vacant parking lot right now. And so we would like to build up to close to where our existing building walls are, but our existing building is offset by maybe 10 feet from the property line. So we want to build up to that. So those right there, those 2 little lines, that's the existing building right now. So we want to push up against that. The other one is up the larger covered parking. I think we could build that building without we could build it shorter, if you would. It wouldn't provide the parking that we need, but this setback issue allows us to build that with the understanding that we're continuing to move forward with acquisition of that property. That may come sooner, so this may become a non-issue, but right now we've got that as a concern. And we did have a meeting with the neighborhood, which the military department attended, and they saw this layout here as well. And so right now they don't have any opposition to our plan. They're still working on how we can work this property deal.
Okay. One more question. I think Mr. Hyman indicated that you'd like to put windows and other things in the back of the building that may not fit in with the neighborhood as well, but you can't see it from Center Street. Did I understand that correctly?
No, I'm not sure. You're talking about the office building, the new building?
I think so. The office building.
Well, and the main thing the point I was trying to make with that building is just trying to break it down into a residential scale so that it fit with the scale of the neighborhood.
But I thought you mentioned something about from Center Street, when you look at the building, you would put windows and other things in that would fit in with the historic character of the neighborhood, but the back of the building, since it doesn't face the street, you wouldn't. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah.
You may be talking, and the sketch might be a little misleading. That's definitely about space and not really. I mean, there's so many concepts that are going to come out of this, but we're trying to give you some sense of how it fits into the bluff. The back buildings, I think what we're looking for is an exemption, and maybe this is what Tony's talking about, which is those upper buildings would have an exemption from the historic look, if you will. But the Center Street side of that would have to meet those requirements. So the upper buildings, because they're industrial buildings, because they don't really kind of fit into the mold of they're just by virtue of what they are, they're not
Yeah.
going to anywhere, there's not really a good way to make them look historic. But the Center Street side would definitely fit into that category.
And that makes sense to me as long as from above the bluff, looking down, it's not visible. And I'm not familiar with it looking down. I'm familiar with it from the Center Street side, looking at the building and looking up.
No, I think what we're trying to say is that all the buildings on the upper site are basically they're an industrial area, it's an industrial site, and it's not visible from Center Street. Those buildings we're asking to be exempt. The building down here, no matter which side it is going to comply with the standard, the commercial standards on that lower level. So that building, we want it to look good from every direction, and we want that's going to be the building we'll focus most of the architectural attention on, and from all angles.
And so then again, my question is, from above the industrial buildings,
Yeah.
is there a place even further above or back from that where you look down onto the McLaughlin neighborhood, up higher on the bluff, that
Not-
you can see those industrial
I mean,
buildings?
from Waterboard Park looking down.
Yes.
There's from what I've seen is these houses here. There's a few houses here, which do look into that area, but everything else. This is all park up here, and they don't look at. There's a house here, and I don't think from that house. I don't think you can look into the yard. You look down. They have nice views on all directions except back in this direction. So I think the only houses are right here that have any view at all, and we're trying to landscape that area. We've also pushed, one comment was to shield the fueling station, and we're doing that with landscape. So we're doing everything we can to preserve their view.
And what street is that those homes are on above that can look down?
South John Adams.
And my only other comment is that I agree with Mr. Basinger that I'd like to hear what the neighborhood association has to say. I'm all for building up because I think we have to make our urban core more dense, but it needs to be in proportion with
Right.
what's surrounding.
We're limited really in what the scope of our approval can do. We can, I don't think it's working.
Can't hear you.
Hello.
Does yours work? Yeah, yours
Yeah,
works.
mine works.
Now it works.
Start singing.
Maybe it works. It's not very loud.
You want to use mine? Here.
Neither am I. Oh, well, that would work. The scope of our approval would relate to some specific things. Wouldn't relate to the zero setback issues or the height variance, except as it relates to the historical compatibility of the design. And but the exemption of historical design standards in the upper site, I think, is a question for us, certainly. And what else? What other issues? The demolition of the older buildings on the upper and lower sites. So we can maybe discuss each of those.
Well, we can also talk about how the board relates to if those buildings are demolished, as long as they're field surveyed, documented, and yes, they're vernacular, but they're still historic. And if there's a way, if they are to be demolished, I'm talking what's involved here. If they're to be demolished, if there's a way to salvage or adaptively reuse before anything goes into a landfill, for sure. Even though they're vernacular, there's got to be something there. But I also, I was kind of just thinking we were having an update tonight. I didn't know someone was coming looking to bring something home with them.
Well, not necessarily tonight. I think the goal tonight is to, if there's consensus for a particular issue, let them know. But what I'd like to have at our work session in April is kind of the discussion, and then that's where I get the points put down, and I can draft
Yeah.
a letter that then you can sign off of, and then it'll be ready for the April Planning Commission meeting.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Because this is, I just thought you guys were coming to reiterate new stuff. I don't think any of us knew you were looking for something now, or even that we need to have a motion on that, do we?
No, nothing has to
No.
happen tonight. I
Okay.
think what they want to know, if there's clear direction, it'd be nice to know tonight. One clear direction is, do you support having industrial design standards for the upper yard? That's a clear question for them to know.
Yeah, and I think,
And, the demolition issue, the new building issue, obviously that's going to come through design review. Some of those discussions can happen at the work session.
can I ask, phase 1 through 4? What's the timeline? How many years? Funding?
Right,
Moolah?
that depends on funding. I mean, obviously, we'd like to, I mean, we're feeling a stronger and stronger need for the space, the building space, or the office space.
Like, when do you want to get on this? You want to start?
We would like to start doing the grading work on the Phase 1 within a year.
Can you go to phase 1 really fast?
Yeah?
Click
That's-
Can you click it real quick?
Does that grading work also include the demolition?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the immediate, as far as we're concerned, is
Right.
what we have to deal with those buildings.
Yeah, removal of
that's-
those buildings is key, and I guess if there's, and I think we've been under the impression that we're talking all three of them. There's no point in
Sure.
talking one at a time or phasing the approach of removal of any of those, because the grading kind of impacts every single one of them.
Yeah,
and just to use the space the way we need to use it, it's
Yeah, and then as far as making those buildings industrial and then excluding them from things. So basically, from us, it's looking at dealing with those buildings, looking at these as industrial, the area up there.
Yeah,
and for
another
now.
kink to add to this is that that so far they haven't asked for the demolition review to be exempted.
And there's the new.
And we have the new, and that's fine, because I think they make good findings for demolition. I mean,
Sure.
so that's not necessarily the problem, and so that's another thing the board needs to decide. And I don't know what our attorneys, I don't know their answer about exempting the demolition process, but there's really two paths, and this is assuming the legal sign off is the demolition is exempted because you support it here and it's gone through the master plan process.
It trumps.
Or you say, no, you need to come back through HRB and we'll go through demolition. We'll put conditions of approval like documentation
Field survey, and
reusing of the materials through a separate HRB process. And all three buildings can be brought on. So that's something we'll probably need to work through this next month, either the legal answer and then the more political, how do you want to make comments regarding that?
And I think if your concerns are the reuse and whatnot of the buildings, those could also be conditions that are put forward in your memo that we attach to the approval of the master plan.
Sure.
As part of we'll exempt bringing each one of these buildings back for demolition review, but we agree that these things will be included in the master plan and these will be done, and thereby you have our approval. I think there are a couple ways we can probably approach this.
I think it's just even if there is an exemption on the demolition and it can proceed without the board, at least the board could have some sort of teeth as far as the surveying and
that can be
adaptive
either
reuse.
done through the master plan process, conditions with the planning commission, or separately through
Yeah.
your own demolition review.
But at least what they're looking for from us, we can deal with in a work session.
Yes.
Okay. That sounds groovy. I think we're kind of pretty much, sort of almost kind of there. Yeah.
I think we are.
Yeah. So.
The only, Tony, I guess I'm uncertain. I mean, the neighborhood association, for instance, is the testimony that they need to hear at the public hearing, or does the planning commission and the historic review board, is there a connect there, or are they on two
they're
different
separate, aren't they?
tracks?
Kind of on two separate tracks.
Separate.
So how do we, what I'm hearing from you is you want to hear from the neighborhood. We have some meeting notes. We have somebody here in the audience, but I'm not really sure she's even prepared to talk on behalf of the neighborhood tonight, but maybe she is. I don't know. But
A couple of things I could
you could bring to the table.
suggest.
Yeah. So should we do that tonight?
Certainly, it's at the discretion of this board if they
Okay.
want to hear from the
Just-
public. And, you know, there will be, you know, through the public hearing process in front of the planning commission, obviously, you know, we'll be taking public testimony at that point as well. You know, the Historic Review Board can submit their letters, or they could even come and testify at that hearing in front of the planning commission to bring forward their issues. You know, since this isn't really a public hearing per se in front of the Historic Review Board.
I don't think we need to do that tonight. And I
Okay.
think that probably based on even what Denise commented, that she hasn't seen a lot of that stuff, and though there might be comments, it could be.
One thing we could do is we can
Person.
have the Neighbor Association send me, like an email, their comments that I can forward on to you as part of the work session in
That
2
would be
weeks,
great.
too.
I think that's a efficient way to deal with that. Okay, so I think we're done.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming tonight. Very well laid out. Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Chair, we also have a request this evening to, no, I don't have it right now. Yeah. Not tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Denise. But yeah, Denise, because this isn't a land use thing, we haven't had that much people who are new this year, but I think the
Muddling.
board is looking for comment, so, yeah. There was a request this evening from Mrs. Oshiro, the HR 0901, to be moved up above the preservation grant. She was last on the agenda at the previous meeting, and I'm going to leave it up to the board and the two other people here for the preservation grants. But I wanted to forward that request
Who wants to
on.
wait the longest?
I wanted to forward that request on.
I guess my question is, are there people here, has people signed in?
I just asked, we don't have anything to sign in on.
So we can go verbal. I don't know. Well, she was here a month ago or so, and she was last, and she did wait a long time. If you're all right with it, that's fine. In fact, what we have on the grants are out of order anyway from the list. Danged if I do, and danged if I don't.
As entertaining as we are, we can imagine.
How could you not want to hang around and party? All right, that's fine. We're going to do that. I'm going to probably make somebody angry. Okay. Hang in there with me on this. I will be as eloquent a tactician as possible, but I am required to read this for a public hearing. Okay, we will now commence the public hearing on agenda item HR 09-01, a request for approval of 824 Center Street historic designation. The criteria for approval of a land use action are contained in Chapter 17 of the Oregon City Municipal Code. The proposed development must comply with applicable provisions contained in the City of Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. Generally, unless otherwise noted, if a request is found to be consistent with the municipal code, it is considered consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you wish to participate in this hearing, including challenges for bias or conflict of interest, you must complete the sign-in form located on the table at the front of the room and deliver it to staff, which she's doing now. Please do so immediately. The chair will only recognize those who have submitted complete forms. Testimony will be taken in the following order: applicant, testimony in favor, testimony in opposition, rebuttal by applicant. When recognized by the chair, please come forward to the podium, give your name, address, and make your statement. All testimony, arguments, and evidence presented regarding this request must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Please address only the applicable criteria for the decision. Please do not repeat testimony. If you wish, you may choose merely to agree with the previous speaker's statements. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record or at the final evidentiary hearing. Such issues shall be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of persons to participate in the public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes that person right of appeal to the City Council or LUBA. Written testimony submitted prior to the hearing constitutes participation in the hearing. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. The Commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing pursuant to the standards contained in ORS 197.763. Do any of the board members have a conflict of interest or ex parte contact regarding this application?
No.
Who's visited the site? I have. Okay. With that, we can open the public hearing. We get to start with staff report.
Thank you, Chair. What we have is a kind of unique application this evening. This is a request for designation to the local McLaughlin Conservation District. As of the mid-90s, designation to a local historic district requires owner consent. And as such, we've had subsequently very few requests. And up until this last year with the Preservation Grant Program, we've had very little carrots for give incentives for property owners to be designated. In this situation this spring, we have a property owner who's interested in looking at the opportunity for designation, especially it relates to the ability to go through the Preservation Grant Program. The 2002 inventory for this property, done by actually Mr. Pinyard, who you met this evening with Historic Preservation Northwest, who's the Historic Preservation Consultant for the Public Works Master Plan, who spoke with you this evening, also worked with the city in 2002 to update the McLaughlin Conservation District's inventory form. And this building had a windshield survey and a preliminary analysis done that the building was considered altered but potentially eligible for the district. Real quickly, this is a 2.5-story four-square with, as you can imagine, you can see pretty substantial alterations on the front elevation and an addition on the rear elevation. But you can still see the bones of the building and the four-square that it was, architecture was built under. Notice was sent to both the neighbors and the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association last month, alerting them to this meeting. And I want to just briefly identify the two public comments I received for this. One, Denise McGriff of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association supports the application with the condition that the applicant work with city staff on our larger rehabilitation plan. I will specifically read her comments. It is recommended that additional research should be undertaken beyond the current resource survey form to provide additional information about this house, similar to other detailed reports already completed. Incompatible alterations have been made to the original structure that are reversible, for example, such as restoring the sleeping porch, removal of the second-story deck on the southern facade, and additions that belong with the group home occupancy. It is strongly recommended that the applicant work with staff to create the framework of a rehabilitation and restoration plan for the exterior of the property, and recommendations on craftspeople and contractors with preservation experience would also be helpful. Also in your packet, I believe on the last page, is a petition signed by residents of Center Street, and they requested additional information on the rehabilitation plans, timeline, and concerns for solid waste on site. And I do want to direct any solid waste issues directly to our code enforcement department, which it's not necessarily purview of the board this evening. The inventory form that was submitted in 2002 does not have that background information, the deed research, understanding of the family that was there when the house was originally built. And that can be researched, and as a condition of approval, number one of this application is the applicant work with city staff to acquire that. That's a condition of approval for designation, and that will get done, but I don't know if that's necessarily a requirement to all be done prior to any designation. So I'd like to have that as a condition. There is a little bit of kink now working with the Museum of the Oregon Territory and getting, photographs needed since they are closed right now, but I'd like to work with them and the applicant along with doing some deed research, and I can do that as staff and help them. Condition approval number 2 is taking kind of the comments from Denise McGriff, and I've put these in, and I think really what the board needs to look at tonight is, do you want this designation to have a condition that the applicant work on a preservation plan or not? As I've talked to the applicant and even some other people in the neighborhood about this, there is a win-win opportunity for both the applicant and the city. There's a path that we could go down that I feel both parties could feel that they have a solution that they're proud of. Because the ball's kind of in Mrs. O'Shea's court right now for designation, I do worry about providing too onerous a rehabilitation plan on this. I know she's a little bit uncomfortable with the proposed condition approval number 2 and what that really would entail. Another option could potentially be no conditions of approval are placed on the designation, but maybe through the preservation grant program, you might work with Mrs. O'Shea, and we'll give you some grant money for the windows, but when you come back for phase 2 or phase 3, we want to see a larger preservation plan. I mean, that could be another avenue to get at that larger picture. One solution to tonight is that the applicant walks away, chooses not to get designated, and goes and chooses to do exterior alterations as she wants. And because this is a conservation district and this building is not designated, there is no city review authority over exterior alterations. So she can replace with vinyl windows, she can make more alterations to the building, and there is no review authority for that. So there is definitely some give and take in this issue, and I'd like to see a path where it's a win-win for both people, but it's definitely a narrow path, and there has to be kind of clear communication. And one thing we do have at the Historic Review Board and the neighborhood, and through our preservation resources, are a lot of people who've worked on older homes and can provide a lot of free assistance to help with preservation plans and getting an idea of kind of what the next step is and what can be done that maybe is not an exact replica of the Foursquare home that was, but maybe is closer in context to the architecture of the Foursquare if there's any rehabilitation work being done. So while I do have recommended approval number 2 on this through looking at the neighborhood association and neighbors' concerns, I do worry that putting too onerous a condition number 2 will make the applicant not want to move forward with the designation. So kind of what that will bring the applicant up tonight, but hopefully we can find something, a solution that fits everybody's needs. But it's definitely going to be something where clear lines of communication are open and people understand what's expected of them. So this house is, talking to our attorneys and inside the office, this is not a National Register district. We're not making findings that it's eligible for listing on the National Register. We're making findings that this is a house that can be designated in our local historic district. So the kind of threshold for designation is lower than your traditional National Register nomination. So I do want to interject that as something to think about tonight. But this is not an easy one, and it's a unique one. So I'm available to answer any questions, and I know people are here tonight to make public comment, and I know the applicant's here to talk. So.
Can we go to the applicant?
Yeah.
Come on up, state your name and your address.
Good evening. I'm BJ Oshiro, 824 Center Street.
Can I ask you, do you live in the property?
Yes, but not full-time.
Gotcha. Okay. Go
I
right
will be
ahead.
moving back into it full-time, probably first of next month.
I just
But
noticed
in the meantime, I live there a few days a week.
I just noticed from the neighborhood, they noted that it was vacant. And that was just my question. Okay.
Since this picture has been taken, I have removed the metal siding that was on the outside of the home. Underneath that was asbestos siding. Last year we removed that. And this year I'd like to finish the facade and be able to make a lot of headway on the inside. My desire is not to put it back into its original state. My desire is to, and I think you have some designs that I had drawn up, where I would have two little balconies on the upper floor on each end that would be about 10 by 10, leaving the pop out in the middle. And then the one side where the living room is, which is the side closest to the corner, I would have that part of the porch opened up. The front door would be put back into its original spot, but the other side would remain popped out to the front where it is now.
I'm sorry, do you have the current picture of the state that it's in?
No, I don't.
It looks pretty much like that, except, also the awnings aren't up there either. But I mean,
But right now, from
It's-
seeing it's exposed
it's
shiplap sheathing is what's there now. So what-
some of it is the underwood, but most of it is the original 100-year-old wood.
right,
which
but right
is-
now you've got exposed sheathing on it, is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
yes, from where we removed the asbestos.
Yeah.
And I'm okay going either way, you know? And so I'm excited about this hearing because it'll help me move forward one way or the other.
How do you feel about some of the conditions that have been asked for on the property?
I'm very adamant that I'm not going to open up the entire second floor or the entire first floor balconies.
Okay.
You can see there's a stairway to the west. No, that'd be the south side of the home. Up above, that would come down when we open up the that balcony over there.
Yeah.
If you are eligible for the grant program, what do you contemplate doing?
I understand that I would have to put wood windows in. I want a very tight home. I want it to have insulation in the walls. I want it to have energy efficient windows. And I'm not 100% sure that 100-year-old windows will give me that. And that's, I guess, why I thought I would check the grant program out, because I thought it would give me a little extra if I did put the wood windows in to have, you know, what you want, but what I want too, which is energy efficiency.
Do you understand that if it's designated that you're, I don't want to say on the hook, but you're involved in having your property designated, anything that you would do to it would have to come to the board? Anything on the exterior?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But anything I would do to the exterior would be an improvement over what it is now.
Absolutely. That's a great house. It's got great potential.
I think it has good bones. It has, I have a
it's
vision for it.
It's a cool house. I think I asked you a couple months ago, but I was curious about the building in the back. What's your plan with that?
My plan for that is to use it for multi-family housing.
Turn it into accessory dwelling unit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It hasn't been a single-family home for 50-some years, and it would be too much space for me to try to utilize that area too. I'm a single woman, I don't have any kids, and no pets.
That's a big house.
And right now, no boyfriend.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions? Anybody? No? Any other comments you want to bring before?
I don't think so. I think Christina did a good job of
Yeah.
explaining
And
where
if-
I'm coming from.
And if the applicant not ready to make a decision tonight, can easily continue this application. You know,
Yeah.
nothing has to be decided tonight. It's up, I mean, the ball's in her court. So, after hearing the comments,
Sure.
the person, she can choose to ask for the designation tonight. She can withdraw her application tonight. She can ask for continuance tonight. So, I mean, there's definitely options for her tonight.
I guess my question again is, are you really on the fence, or are you leaning one way or the other? It sounded like you said you can go either way, but I'm curious about your desire, your real desire.
My real desire is, after talking to Christina, is probably, if there is too many limitations, I'm out of here, because I can do what I want. And all I won't get is a couple $1,000s.
Are you
So-
looking? Can you see if having this designated, it could certainly help the neighborhood, help you, help the home itself?
Whether I get the money or not, I'm still going to make it appealing to the neighborhood. I'm still going to keep the traditional siding. Maybe they won't. Maybe I can't afford to put all wood windows in. Maybe I'll have to put energy efficient vinyl in. But I mean, from the street, it wouldn't be, to me, that obvious. But I just want to give some personality to the home and make it livable.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you very much. Maybe now we can have testimony from someone who's in support of the application. Oh, here we go.
So do I go see
Well, Denise, are you going to go both sides?
Yes.
Come on down. Please state your name and your address. And then, before you start, Pamela, you didn't state, are you in opposition or support?
They're not sure.
You're not sure? Okay, so we have a fence category tonight.
Yeah, that's neither of them.
Okay, well, if we can keep them concise and wherever on the fence, that would be great. Go ahead.
Anyway, just for the staff's knowledge, I am going to be testifying twice on this, and I didn't decide that until just 2 seconds ago.
Okay, so you're going to start with in support.
I'm going to be sitting here right now. I'm Denise McGriff, and I'm representing the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association on this particular application. And I believe in your packet you saw the comments that I submitted on behalf of the neighborhood. I think that you are all aware, at least maybe not in person, but at least by written recommendation, that the McLaughlin neighborhood has spent a lot of time, the residents have spent a lot of time investing in this particular neighborhood. We were partners with the city on the new design guidelines. We had extensive meetings over a period of, it seemed like a year, but maybe it wasn't quite that long. And I think you have a group of people in this neighborhood I would not describe as zealots, but I would describe as people who really care. They are in that neighborhood because they want to be there. We feel, I think, as an organization, that anyone who wants to have their property designated should be able to do so. And I think in my comments, what I meant by a framework is exactly what I said. I did not specify a detailed restoration plan. A framework could be something to the effect of bullet points, which says, this is what's going to be step one, this is going to be step two. And the reason that I did put that in there is because of this application, as you know, I live in the area, which is why I'll be testifying a second time. I had lots of neighbors come up to me on the street and ask me questions about this particular application and also give me comments. I felt it was important to respect some of those comments by asking for a very minimal framework of a process. I believe that she has lived there or has owned the property for about 5 years. And I think there were some concerns, which is why I put that in there. But I support, from the Neighborhood Association standpoint, we do support that designation. And designation adds to the value not only from the historic standpoint of reinforcing our neighborhood, but it also adds to our property values. This property is surrounded, at least on 3 sides, by historically designated properties, all of which people have put time, energy, and money into making them look better according to the city's design guidelines. And that's very important that we maintain that integrity. So that's why the comments that I submitted after thinking about them for quite a while, and I did have an opportunity to meet with Bonnie. I went to her office and spent probably about an hour, probably an hour too long with her, talking about preservation. And I actually brought some material to give her, something from one of our Oregon City history notes as to why historic preservation is important. I don't have to tell you, it's preaching to the choir, but I thought it was worth noting that that is something that we feel very strongly about. I also included in this, and I will give this to her upon the conclusion of my testimony, house restoration, the 2 golden rules, or it's called do the right thing. And the 2 golden rules are, number 1, do not destroy good old work. And number 2 is to thine own style be true. And these came from the Old House Journal. And I found a lot more stuff, but I haven't had time to copy it. But I do want to give these to her, and as I said, you already know why preservation is important, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So I think that the Neighborhood Association can support this recommendation from the staff, and we feel pretty good about it in the sense that there really should be at least a monicum or even bullet points. It could be 3 items, could be 2 items, could be 1 item, just to say, this is what I'm going to do, so that it's known. And I think that there are things that can be done to that house that can bring it back that would not be expensive. And as a matter of fact, I was going through some of my own papers, and from the 1915 issue of the Enterprise Courier's Chamber of Commerce document, I have a picture that looks down the street. You can only see the front part of the house, but you can definitely see it. And I'm going to be getting a copy of that and bringing that to staff, so that she can see it as well. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pamela, Phyllis, are you in opposition or in favor?
Well,
You're a fence? Which one are you?
right now I'm in favor.
Well, I need to know because I got to do this. So you're in favor?
To a point.
Well, why don't you come on down and while we're in the
Go up together.
in favor of
Yeah, go up together. That'll be good.
Yeah.
Keep each other.
okay, if we can keep it concise. Go ahead and state your name and your address for each of you.
Phyllis Gehring at 916 Center Street.
I know that house.
And
And
we're naturally walk by the house every day, have for years and years. And we're very hopeful that BJ wants to restore it and get it back to a single-family home as it was originally built for. People in the neighborhood, well, we kind of wonder what her timeline is as far as getting it, her project finished, and we'd like to see some work done on the outside so that so many people come to Oregon City and go to the McLaughlin House, and that's the only museum that's open right now. And then they walk up and down the street just looking at the homes and the trees and what have you. And I get questions all the time about, well, what's happening to this house, and hopefully it'll get restored. So it would be great to see it back the way it was originally.
Okay.
I'm Pam Weiss at 920 Center Street. We walk by this home every day. And in 5 years, it's become more and more and more and more and more unsightly. There's trash everywhere, and it is not improved. There is a little bit of siding off in the front, but it's only around what would be the porch normally. I would be ecstatic to see it come back to its beautiful self that it deserves. But in 5 years, nothing has come of it. I would love for it to be different. I mean, there's trash in the windows and trash on the ground, and I don't understand. That is a simple thing, an inexpensive thing to remove trash. And if you need trash in your windows, maybe you could have put it below the windows so that we wouldn't have to enjoy it. I haven't seen any improvement at all in 5 years. And, all of us on that street, it is exactly like Phyllis says. People walk up and down our street constantly all the time. And, it's unsightly and almost embarrassing to bring friends and family down our lovely street, and there's trash. I mean, that's a simple, inexpensive thing. So if in 5 years the trash isn't removed, then what's going to happen? I mean, we need a timeline. There has to be some set progress in this. I mean, you can't just say, I'm going to do it, and 5 years later, there's just trash laying outside and in the windows. And then why would the neighborhood care if the inside was taken care of right now? We would just like the outside to not be unsightly. I'm sorry, I'm a little emotional.
No, that's okay.
but
That's
if
fine.
you walk by it every day.
I understand. That's more of a
and-
code enforcement thing,
Yeah,
not
well,
so much a
I know, but doesn't it
HRB
show
thing.
also that nothing is being done in 5 years? So why do we as neighbors believe that something will be done in the next 5 years?
Sure. No, I understand.
I would love it. I don't know BJ, but I would love for this home. It looks like an abandoned. I don't know.
I hear
It's
you.
sad. It's just, when you see the potential of it, it's a lovely place. But and as far as having a lot of people live there, is that even zoned in our neighborhood? I don't even know. I mean, the people behind us at one time had a few people living in their basement and were not allowed to do it. And maybe it's because
I know it's zoned R3.5, but it's a single-family structure, and that's all it can be with an accessory dwelling unit. Right?
Yeah, and I can talk about this after.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
I was
that's
totally
fine.
unprepared to speak, and I just feel that I have not personally, and my husband and our family, have not seen anything change in 5 years. Maybe that siding came off and cut down some trees, then left stumps sticking up, but and then the trash, I don't get it. I mean, I would be glad to come over and help her pick up the trash, or remove it from the windows and throw it on the floor, or cover the window. I know it's a trash. The thing is, I don't see anything happening in 5 years, so why do I believe, without a proper timeline, that something will happen now? That's all I'm saying. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Sounds like those, thus far, more comments from people who are neither proponents or opponents, the fence sitters, I guess. But I appreciate both sides of that. We can probably then go on to those that are in opposition to the application?
I'm not going to speak in opposition.
Okay, then we have no one. Okay, are there any questions from the hearing body? Anybody here that has a question? Yes, Denise?
I don't have a question, but I would like to testify.
In
general.
in general. Okay, I think we can do that pretty quick. Sure. So you'd be somewhere in there.
Thank you again. Denise McGriff, and I live at 815 Washington Street in Oregon City, and I am an adjacent neighbor to this particular piece of property. I moved to Oregon City in 1988, and in 1989, my husband and I purchased our historic home. And we specifically were looking for a historic home, and the McLaughlin neighborhood seemed to fit the T and fit our needs. We have, over the last 20 years, I must say, 'cause my son will be 20, been working on our house, maybe not continuously. 2005, we had a big push and did a whole bunch of stuff. And now I think our next project is going to be repainting the outside, which is pretty darn good, having had it last quite a long time. My main reason for coming back up and testifying is that as a neighbor, like Pam, I too am emotionally connected to this neighborhood. I drive or walk by this house every day and had many friends who lived in the group home. They were, at that time, developmentally disabled and very nice, mainly harmless people, but lovely neighbors, and we enjoyed having them. We consistently would talk to the owners about what they could do to fix up the house or do things to keep it maintained. I applaud Vicki, and I admire, not Vicki, excuse me, Vicki. I'm looking at you, Vicki, and I'm thinking Vicki. Applaud BJ for having the guts to buy this. Maybe she didn't really know what she was getting into, but I can tell you for my part, it's an exciting adventure. I support her if she would like to have the house designated, but I don't want to be unrealistic or untrue when I say that having a historically designated home, in my opinion, is an honor. I feel privileged to be able to be a temporary caretaker of my house. I know I'm not going to live there forever, although I'd like to, and so I'm going to do the best that I can. And I hope that all my neighbors feel maybe not exactly the same way, but they know that they have something special that nobody else in the city has. And our neighborhood, that little tiny block area, the Center Street, Washington Street area, is a real tight little neighborhood. We all know each other primarily. We've watched each other do things to our houses. We've seen paint colors come and go. We've seen repairs, sidewalks, all that sort of thing. So everybody knows. We all know each other. We all know of each other. We don't know everybody's business particularly, but we all know each other and we're all friendly with each other. I think it's important that this house add to that vitality of our neighborhood, particularly that portion of our neighborhood, and that it be a contributing member, and I think that's really important. And I think Bonnie does want to do the right thing and be a part of that. We all will look forward to having her there. Is anybody actually there, BJ? Yeah. Okay, because like I said, I drive by it at all hours of the day or night, and my husband has constantly mentioned me, says, anybody really there? That's my husband. I said, I think so, sort of. So there is that, and as you said, it does kind of look like nobody's there. And we do have concerns. We have somewhat of a neighborhood watch, and we do want to keep an eye on it. So if we see something that doesn't look quite right, we want to let somebody know so that we don't have other problems. We have fairly low burglary rates in the neighborhood. But I support this with the conditions, and you know my reasons for that, because I think you have to have some sort of, you should have a plan, even if it's in your head, and she could articulate that to Christina. Again, it is a single-family residential neighborhood. We all bought into the single-family residential neighborhood, and I think at the time the group home and the hospital, which is down the street, are basically the two things that were not specifically single-family residential. But it's a great neighborhood. We love the neighborhood. I think that, we all have a lot of advice and information we can depart to her, and we would love to jump in and help. And again, I support it with the conditions of a general framework.
Thank you very much. Well, we can have rebuttal testimony from the applicant if you'd like to come up and comment on what's been said. one more time.
I don't know what to say.
Do you have any comments on what's been said, or is that how you?
No, I think I've already said my position. I don't think I have any other further comments.
And do you still feel you want a designation?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Anything else? Or is that it?
Well, I think what we can do is maybe the board can deliberate, and before any vote is taken, kind of check back with the applicant about what the next steps are. I want to briefly just comment on the multifamily, single-family, just so on the record I can
Sure.
give staff comment. And, you know, this is the non-attorney staff comment, so if this wants to be pursued further, I definitely work with our city attorney to get kind of the final
Right.
opinion. But as was identified before, this was previously a group home, and it was multifamily in nature. The property is zoned R3.5, which is what we call a two-family dwelling, but you really only get that second family option when you're at 7,000 square feet.
Right.
And this property is 5,600, something like that.
You
So
can have an ADU.
Right. Well, right, and so every single family home in the city has that ADU
Yes.
option. The one question, and this is kind of where, you know, I'm not speaking for the city through a city attorney. There's always the continuation of a nonconforming status or grandfather status. We have a process through the city where an applicant can go through and request a nonconforming approval letter that says, yes, that group home was created legally in 1960 or whatever it was, and it still continues as a multifamily, and being vacant for 5 years, you do not lose your status, or you have lost your status by being vacant for 5 years. And that's one thing that, now that I've listed this, I maybe recommend the applicant can do, and that's where the city gives that final decision. The applicant turns in some background information. We do some research. We talk to attorneys. We make that final decision if, because it was vacant for 5 years, if she's lost that grandfathered ability to be multifamily, or if for some reason she's, you know, by being vacant, she hasn't lost it. So that, you know, not knowing the full information, but just in general, when we see a property that has gone back to single family, once you go back to a conforming use, you generally lose your non-conforming grandfathered status. So those are general.
Gotcha.
But I can definitely recommend that the applicant can work through a process. We have a pretty easy. It's either we have a type 1 process where you just pay city staff by hour, which takes like $60 to get that answer, or you kind of go through a type 2 process where it's noticed to the neighbors, and that's a little bit more money. But there is a formal process where you can get a finite decision from the city. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bonnie. If it's all right, I can close the public hearing and thank those that spoke for, or against, or right on the middle. So if the public hearing's closed, we can actually talk or have questions for Christina or anybody else.
I don't have any questions.
Progress is made in baby steps. And you can't make the second step until you make the first step. And the first step to preserving this as a historical property in Oregon City is designated as, they can grant the designation. And I'm reading page 2 of the staff report, A through I, the criteria to be used by the HRB in reaching a decision. And I don't see anything A through I that I can disagree with, or that I can find not how am I saying this? The applicant is, in what I can see, compliant with those criteria.
I think I worry about, yeah, I agree with that. I think I worry about if, and this is just my comment, if we put conditions, whether they're out there, whether they're in thought, whether they're in theory, could create some issues down the line on future applications that someone could come back and say, look, we put these conditions on this designation that hasn't had, that previous designations have not had. Why was this singled out? And can we do the same on this future property? That's my concern, that it could set a precedent that may not be healthy for any future applications. We're here to approve a designation, not so much whether it's a code enforcement issue or as much as I would like to see a timeline. I don't know if that's something that's requisite to a designation. And though I agree with the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association's suggestions, they're great suggestions. All of that's great. I'm sure everybody would like to see it happen yesterday. But I don't know if we have the ability to put a timeline on something like that, because I know there's plenty of homes in both districts that are designated that aren't in any better shape in some cases than this property. Not to say that that's a good thing.
The designation itself carries with it
Responsibility.
a lot of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
And I agree with you that adding additional conditions is possibly not in the best interest of the application.
And I agree with that, too. I applaud the applicant for applying. I'm really thrilled. I live in that neighborhood, and I think the house has great bones and a lot of potential. And even if it has taken a lot of time for the work to be done, the applicant is showing a true interest in proceeding and moving back to the neighborhood. And I'm in favor of the designation, and I think that it's the first step for having the applicant embraced by her neighbors, and becoming more of a part of the neighborhood, and learning more about historic preservation. And I'm very excited about it.
Is that the start of a formal motion?
Okay.
Do you want to
Sure.
say what form a motion with? Go ahead.
Just real briefly,
Can we-
can I kind of comment really quickly before?
Yeah. Am I jumping too quick?
No, I just, regarding the condition of approval number 2, is it going to be removed completely, or is it going to be revised? I just want to I just want to reiterate kind of what Denise McGriff commented on. You know, if my condition of approval is too strong, I think what the Neighbor Association really wanted wasn't a timeline. It was, when they say framework, like putting your thoughts on paper and bulleted points just to think through the process and have it be non-binding. I think that was their intention,
But
where I
it-
might have written something a little bit more binding.
Right.
So I want to make sure that there's, I think we're talking apples and oranges sometimes in this condition number 2, between what the neighborhood wanted and what I interpreted.
Yeah, I'm just asking, can we even have those conditions if it's outside the parameters of what's required?
If you feel that that condition is needed in order to meet the criteria, then yes, you could do that.
We don't want a timeline.
What's that?
We don't want a timeline. Like I said, it's taken me 20 years to get, if I had a timeline, that doesn't.
You'd be in trouble.
Well, it's
No,
only
I'm-
money.
Yeah,
As
I hear you.
know.
I also hear the concerns of who lives there and what you have to live with, and I also know it'd be great to have it done quickly, but
Unless she wins the lottery, that it just ain't gonna happen. Are you gonna win the lottery? Yes, I know, that's my problem.
Not to complicate things any.
I think a motion has to have something. I don't think we can even do that. No, because then you're going outside the bounds of what
Maybe this is a suggestion.
You're going back out of what.
I do have a question for staff. You indicated at the outset that this is a rare occasion When was the last time someone applied for this?
I can tell you actually exactly who it was. It was Miss Cindy Toll and her husband in 1998, 1999, and two other property owners.
And is there
10 years
actually
ago.
a precedent for attaching special conditions?
It's not. I think that's a very good question. It's not special conditions, but if you feel that condition meets the criteria under 1744 designation, I think you might be answering your own question when you commented that said you felt it meets it as is. Then maybe you might not be able to make findings that it meets the criteria for designation. Where you could also make the finding that understanding what the full rehabilitation would be could help you make findings for designation. It really depends on what your findings are. I think that you could make a case either way.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a point of procedural order just to help Christina answer that
I
question?
think we'd have to open the public hearing back up. No? Are we?
It's up to you.
Are we? We're easy enough.
Okay. I could clarify a couple of things. Thank you. For the record, Denise McGriff, 815 Washington Street. And Christine is correct. The last time that properties came in and were requested for designation was Cindy Toll, and I believe it also was Gretchen and Scott Walker, who have a house on 4th Street. Those houses were already in a condition as is that they had already been rehabilitated. I think the question that I had when I put this to the staff in my statement was that this house has not been rehabilitated. And all the other designations that I had the pleasure of working on were already done. They had work on the inside that they were working on, but the houses on the exterior were already completed. You could look at them, see that they were the way they were when they were built, and that was, I should have probably been a little more explicit with that, but that's what she's alluding to, which is why I made the recommendation of at least a general framework plan, not a timeline. That's, again, unless we win the lottery, we're just not going to get there with old houses. So that's why I suggested that. Thank you.
Gotcha. Well, any comment or any thought?
Well, personally, I would like to go forward and move for approval without condition.
Well, number 2.
Excuse me?
We still need condition number 1.
Yeah, without condition number 2.
Your conditions 1 and 3 and 4? Yeah.
And just at this point, though, before a vote is given, it's up to the applicant to decide if she wants to move forward, though, because once you vote to
Yeah,
approve
yeah.
this, that is a land use decision. So I
Right.
just want to let you know.
Right here. Conditions of approval. That's what Christine is asking.
It's page 5 of
page
5
5.
of HR 0901. It's about the fifth to last page of your packet, or sixth to last page of your packet.
I don't have a problem with that. Well, right here, this one. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Vicki, Kensing, this. Okay. Bonnie, do you want to have any comment, or do you want to make a decision before we actually make a motion? You still,
Or can you state your opinion after you hear what the motion is? I think that would be relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you can either ask to continue the application or withdraw it
Condition one.
up until I call the vote. So everything has to be done before I call the vote.
And you've got to state that HR 109
I move that, that we recommend that historic designation in HR 0901 be approved with staff recommendation number 1, but without staff recommendation number 2.
Is there
I
a
will
second?
second that.
Second? Okay.
Now, given that,
Okay.
Well, there's a second. We have to vote on it. If you look at page 5,
Basically, what I moved was to approve the historic designation with the condition that prior to gaining designation, you work with the city staff to acquire background information on the on the history of the house, but no further conditions would be applied.
well, we have a second motion. We have to put it to a vote. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with this. If none of us do. Right. You fall into the parameters.
Exactly.
You can't do it within 6 months or a year. We would be eliminating number 2.
Right, right. So I have a question after you make this vote, and let's say I have an application for grant money, excuse me. After that, I can't reverse this historic
Correct,
designation,
correct.
which
For a
means
period.
that any windows I put in would have to be historic.
So
That's
one
correct.
option what you could do is you could continue this application, and if you want to move forward with your grant application, we can make the final decision, at the time that the grant. I mean, the grant application has already been proposed. It was proposed in February, so in a sense, I have the application. So if you want to move forward with that grant application of the windows, then
That has to be dealt with separately.
yeah, I
at a
mean,
different
basically,
time.
it's one of those chicken egg things. Like the grant can't be formally approved
Until designation.
But once you designate, you can't.
Once you're designated, you're locked.
Yeah.
Right.
You're in. You have,
So if you want to relook at your grant and muddle it over and figure out if that's exactly what you want, you can kind of do research this month, and then we can make the final designation decision the same night you do your grant.
Okay, I guess I was confused. I thought that we were going to do both the same night.
No.
Yeah,
This is just for
we can do. I mean, it's already been approved. I mean, the sense that the grant's been proposed, it just hasn't been formally adopted. It just
Okay.
kind of depends on if she wants to move forward with the designation.
Not tonight, though.
Yeah, well, you could. Well, it was. You're right. It was continued, but
Yeah, that would have to be for another meeting, not tonight.
Okay, so what I'm understanding is if you give me the designation, I can do the design in the house that I proposed or something similar.
not necessarily. I mean, what you proposed in your grant wasn't really formally reviewed for.
We couldn't review that because you didn't have a designation. We knew what you were doing, but this is the first step. It's kind of like, what came first.
So then I might be limited in what I can do on the facade of the house. If I
It
did
has to
this.
come before the board. Anything you do on the exterior has to be approved by the board.
Okay, I think I'll withdraw my application. I'm sorry to waste all your time.
No? Okay, then
You can withdraw, or do you want to just continue it to think about it? Because you can do that too, and just send me an email to withdraw it too. I mean, you don't have to do it over.
but if she withdraws tonight, then we're done.
Yeah, but you
If-
could also mull it over and then send me an email to withdraw too. That's not a problem.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. We're done with that. I'd like to take a 2 or 3 minute recess. I need to use the bathroom. So, and then we'll make this quick. So, these leather too. So, excuse me for a minute.
Thank you very much for patience tonight. Yes. Well, no, it's this one was turned in, so you're hopefully it's back there. Okay. Can you ask her? I mean, he's fine. Thank you. I'm sorry, this, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, you are. Bill said he'd let you go first. He's the, you know. And how do you say your first name? Yeah, Alice. See, the way your husband wrote it, it looked like Thomas. And I couldn't read it. That's why I have it on there. I thought that is A-L, just normal Alice. I totally misread your handwriting. And I was like, God, what is that name? And I said, well, I got it right down how I see it. No, because it was your...
You know what, when that house was for sale, I drove by because I bought some stuff in the area, which I still
I was
have.
like, that is the strangest name I've ever seen. I'm like, I
But
better put down.
it's so big.
I was like, how do you say that name?
We should try.
God, I can tell you the state of mind I was when I wrote this. I'm like, well,
We're
that's
running
what
late.
it says. Well, now I see it. Now that I see Alice, I see it right there. It's like it's one of those ladies where you see the old lady and you see the young lady.
Okay, if we could get going.
We also actually have another request to move the agenda. We actually have Mr. Berry accepting it. So Dave and Alice Perdue would like to go first. They
Is that
have
3rd Avenue?
Yes, on 3rd Avenue.
Yeah,
so.
which is item 2.
Yeah.
Come on up. This is for a preservation grant 0-9-03310 3rd Avenue for a window repair replacement. We will accommodate as best we can.
Okay.
So you guys are looking to replace a sash on a window.
Yeah.
You saw a white truck in front of your house today. That was me.
Oh, was that you?
Yeah. I kept looking. Which one? Is that? That was me.
Mine was the green truck.
And incidentally, the curb that we dealt with a month or so ago looks pretty good. It's dark and blends in really well. So anyway, go right ahead.
Okay.
Tell us what you want to do.
Dave and Alice Prideaux, 310 3rd Avenue. And I don't know if you had a chance to look through the materials here, but the pictures kind of tell a story. We've got a safety issue with the glass on that one sash, and so we need to repair. We've got 2 bids, and got this in the mail and went through generally, but I just picked up the detail here about the comparison of the 2 bids and the extent of the work. So we didn't have a chance to get to hammer in hand for that, but we'd be okay with all the staff recommendations, to get that, to take the higher bid to replace the whole window rather than just the top part, just the sash.
Or were we talking about replacing it all, or
Yeah.
trying to see if we could
Yeah,
repair?
the two. I mean, generally the goal of these preservation grant program is to try to repair historic windows to the extent practicable, and that's always the word we're at, is practicable. So when an applicant turns in something that's looking at replacement, if a sash, and this, I think, as a future work session item for next year's grant program, I might better spell this out, but I have one Hammer in Hand, great preservation organization. They do this all the time. They proposed a full sash repair, and the other group did not. So it was more of just kind of why two different proposals, and try to get a better understanding for Hammer in Hand why they have a full sash repair on a staff level. I wanted to see, because I always want to make sure when grant money is spent, there's a full understanding of what the repair options were. And if you've left the realm of practicable, because of course every window can be repaired, but you always have to want to make sure you're within that practicable realm. And then when you've left that realm, then it's okay to pay for the replacement sash. And so that, based on what was turned in, it wasn't quite that information, but knowing that they are working with Hammer in Hand can provide that information. And one thing, what you can do tonight on a staff level is you can say this grant is contingent on them providing that to staff. And if I feel that Hammer in Hand hasn't provided enough information, we could throw this just up at the next work session and just say, let the board look at it or something like that.
So can we pass this on to you?
If you feel comfortable, I'm comfortable with it. So,
I think with one window,
yeah.
I think it would be more expeditious for you if we passed it on to Christina, let her deal with it.
Does that mean that she would make the final decision, then we could go
Well,
ahead?
and if I'm not comfortable, I'd throw it back up to the board at their next work session.
Most likely she would probably do it.
Yeah.
You okay with that? Yeah, we're okay with that.
Yeah. I wish we could have done that a while ago for you.
Thank you.
But I think with one window, I think it would be, leaving it up to her would be easier for you guys and for us, and it would, yeah. So that's fine. So we can do that?
Yeah, you just need to make a motion.
Well, I'd make a motion that we can,
Actually, then just amend condition number 1 to provide staff.
we can amend condition number 1, well, motion to I guess, pass on grant 09-04 to staff with condition 1. Is that right?
Oh, just condition 1 revised to say, the applicant shall provide the historic review board to the applicant shall provide staff.
To staff,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be it. Yeah, just what you said.
I second that.
All right. Mr. Basinger?
Aye.
Ms. Yates?
Aye.
Chair McLaughlin?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. Go to bed.
Thank you, appreciate the
Yeah.
expedition.
Sorry that it took a while. I apologize. Thank you very much. Okay, next item, preservation grant 09-04, 411 Madison Street, window replacement. Want to
This-
state your name and your address?
I'm Bill Berry, 411 Madison Street, Oregon City.
I drove by your house today and
You have
down
a
the
very
alley.
You have a very sweet house.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great little neighborhood. You've got a lot of windows.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. You're looking to replace all of them, pretty much.
Well, I read through the
Almost.
conditions that are on here, and Christina explained them to me a little bit when I got here. I'm not really a window expert, so the damage I see to a lot of them, I just assumed you had to replace them. But after talking with her, I realized we need to put it before one of these window repair guys and have them submit some kind of report saying, yes, this window is repairable practically,
Yeah.
or no, it's not. The only thing that I'm wondering about is the insulating value. These are single pane. These are the original windows. So, man, they just
I hear
we
you.
insulated the house this
Sure.
year, and it's tight as a drum now, except the windows. They're just
Well, fortunately, most of you here goes through the ceiling. But, I
oh,
hear
and that
you.
took care of a lot of it. But
Well, I know you can repair these. You can put storm windows in. They work pretty well, and they're historic. But I totally hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Anything you did beyond what you have now is far better than what you have. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
So I guess we were
Yeah.
just going to plan on me getting some reports from people.
Yeah, for this one's a little bit different. I think with the Prideaux's, I felt pretty comfortable that I could get that.
Your response is such.
Yeah, I mean, these are original 6/6 windows. I mean, they're pretty neat and pretty significant to the structure of the house. And so, just to do it, I always feel like I knee-jerk. I always have to give my little preservation, energy, efficiency speech. But
Yes.
Historic old-growth wood windows paired with a wood storm window
Storm
actually
window.
has almost the same R value as a new window, because either go vinyl, which doesn't have the insulating value, or you have a new wood window, which is not old-growth and is not very dense. And so I just try to remind people that I think, as John said, is a majority of your heat loss is from your walls and your windows. And repair, I mean, in a perfect world, repairing and getting all the reglazing, getting all your trim figured out, and a storm windows will give you this almost the same R value.
Well, and I'm
Yeah.
fine with that.
The problem is that's more money, of course, but that's what this grant program's for.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we say is we will give you money to do the ultimate right thing in preservation world and sustainability, because you don't have to send any windows to the landfill too.
Right.
So that's kind of that super win-win for sustainability that you can give money for. So I think for this one, I'd actually like this to come back to the board, and it can even be back at the work session or next month, whatever.
Well, that's
the
what Ken
applicant
just said.
can.
That we need to continue on and get that.
Yeah, I feel less comfortable reviewing this on a staff level.
Right.
Yeah.
So do we need to make that motion to continue it?
Yeah, and it can be continued to the work session. And we have potentially the staff is, the site visit for the McCarver House, but we can retire back after the visit to do, if we have to work on the Public Works Master Plan, we might, we potentially could do this for, 15, 20 minutes if the applicant thinks they can get that in 2 weeks. If they can't get that in 2 weeks, then
Wait till
we
next
continue
month.
it till next month.
Can I make one other
Sure.
comment? I think I could get it within 2 weeks.
Okay.
But item number 4 on your recommendation thing there, that's one thing I'm a little sketchy on. I drew up this whole thing for all of our old original windows.
Uh-huh.
The back of the house are not old original windows. They're like
You got
14 years old, and they're leaking like a sieve. We've got a lot of water damage, and I'm going to have to deal with that first, probably.
Well, and the idea of this grant is we want you to take it in chunks.
Okay.
And also, you'll get more money that way because, next year when we get our refunding, you can apply for a second grant. So in a
Right.
sense, you can kind of, as long as you're not taking grant money away from somebody else who's new to the program, you can kind of come in for $3,000 every year if you want.
Well, my point was, I'm going
Yeah.
to probably have to deal with the ones in the back that
Okay.
are leaking before I even deal with these.
Are you
things.
talking about having it done within 180 days?
That's what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm going to have to do that other first now.
Yeah.
You could
So-
take it, like you said, in phases.
Yeah.
It'd probably be ideal to get it all done at once, but
Yeah, and the 180 days, that's another grant deadline, and that was kind of arbitrary. We took it from a preservation grant program in Forest Grove, because this is our first year, and we've already asked for one grant extension, because she was supposed to get done at the Christmas snow, and everything got
Yeah.
moved. But so that's another thing that the board can, take a look at and see, what our timeline is. We have grant money coming in different ways, and so it's not like we have to get it all done because our one source of grant funding is
Right.
1 year. We have it kind of spread out in 2 different parts of the year, so we always can kind of be using a
Yeah.
certain grant fund. So, either way, you can take a smaller chunk, and we
Yeah.
can just approve a smaller chunk for you if you want. You can come back next year.
Okay.
That's an option. You could come up with a plan where you do it all and you ask for an extension to 180 days and give us a fair reason for it. That's another option too.
I think it'll be predicated on if you can get it to you in a couple weeks. If you can't,
Yeah,
then it'll
that-
have to be dealt with in April.
What I will need to know, because I send the agenda out a week ahead of time, so I don't need I don't need the bid by next Tuesday, but I need to know that you want to move forward by next Tuesday for the work session, which is in 2 weeks.
Okay.
If by next Tuesday you won't be able to, you won't be able to get it in time, then you'll be at the April meeting, which is the 4th Tuesday of the month.
Do we need a motion for that?
Yeah. Why don't you continue it to the work session, then we can continue it again if we need to.
I move that we continue this action until the April work session.
Do you have a second?
Second?
All right. Ms. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Basinger? Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks for your patience. Really appreciate
Yeah.
it. And we're done.